Welcome to Beyond the Battlefield, Stories of Mountain and Air, the podcast that delves into the diverse and compelling careers of the Vermont National Guard and its members. I'm your host, Sergeant Dennis Nunez, Public Affairs Specialist for the Vermont National Guard Joint Force Headquarters. Each episode features a candid conversation with current military personnel in order to shine a light on their personal experiences in and out of uniform. Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind these soldiers and airmen and explore the motivations that drive individuals to pursue a career in the armed forces. Today, we are speaking with Sergeant Sophia Parker, a 68 Whiskey Combat Medic from Charlie Medical Company 186 BSB of the 86th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, Mountain, of the Vermont Army National Guard. Not only is Sophia a member of the Guard, but has an incredibly unique background as a medical practitioner and caregiver for not only people, but animals as well. She is currently studying at Vermont State University College, formerly Castleton, earning her degree in the College of Nursing, and is looking ahead to working in the emergency medical department at UVM-MC. As if that wasn't enough, she is a fierce competitor in the pageantry that is known as the Miss Vermont competition. She participated in this year's Miss Vermont 2024 and was also crowned Miss Vermont's Teen back in 2015. Sophia, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be here.
Great. So I've got a ton of questions for you, and I'm looking forward to kind of hearing more about your background. So let's get right into it. So let's start with Miss Vermont. That's exciting. It seems you started that journey young. Can you tell me how it sort of came to be that you decide I'm going to participate in this and how you've managed to do that for what is now a decade?
So it's kind of a funny story. In high school, I had this teacher who sort of decided to take me under her wing freshman year, and she got me into doing all these crazy things, basically whatever she could get me into to earn scholarship money for college. So she had me doing speech contests and all these different things, and then one of the things she decided to suggest that I get involved in was the Miss Vermont's Outstanding Teen organization. And I pretty much laughed in her face when she suggested this because I had no experience with pageantry and had never thought of myself as someone who would compete in a pageant or anything like that. But eventually she convinced me to give it a try, and I competed for 2 years in high school and ended up realizing that it was such a wonderful organization that really is about education and scholarships and building confidence and leadership skills in young women. And part of what we learn is how to interview, how to present ourselves, how to interact positively with others. And one of the things that we each have to have is a community service initiative. And I'd been a wildlife rehabber pretty much my whole life, so that was naturally my community service initiative. And then, much to my utter shock and the utter shock of my family and everyone I knew, I actually won the state title of Miss Vermont's Outstanding Teen in 2015. And it was so unexpected that literally, my mom started laughing when I won, and I just had this face of, utter shock and disbelief. And my mom was, cracking up in the audience because she thought it was so funny. But I ended up falling in love with the organization, and throughout my year of service, I was able to speak to schools and civic organizations all over the state about wildlife rehab and about the organization that I was now a representative of. And I actually took a long time off and didn't necessarily think that I was going to compete at the Miss level. But then 2 years ago, I decided to come back. And this year, I actually was able to take first runner-up, which was a huge honor. And honestly, just had so much fun with the interview part, talking to the judges, and just spending time with all the amazing girls and getting to know them.
Well, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thanks.
That is speaks to your longevity as being a competitor in that race, and not only winning as a teen, but also coming pretty close this last time around. That's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
It leads me into my next question. What made you choose the Vermont Army National Guard? You're already doing this amazing thing, and you're working with wildlife on the side. What drew you specifically to the Vermont Army Guard and maybe the medical field?
So I had always been interested in medicine. As a kid, I was that weird kid that would see a car accident or see an ambulance going somewhere or see someone needing help, and I would always want to just go and do whatever I could to help. And my parents would be like, honey, you're 6. Like, what are you going to do in a car accident? Like, there's nothing you can do. But I just always had that impulse. And then in high school, I actually joined the Virgins Area Rescue Squad and was able to volunteer with them on the ambulance and learn some that way. And then I decided that I originally thought I wanted to be a doctor, but then I got a little bit more realistic about the amount of school that was and decided that nursing would be the field for me. And specifically being a combat medic had always been of interest to me. My grandfather served in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge, so I'd always heard his military stories and had an affinity and a respect for our service members. But then it's kind of a funny story. Sergeant Cahart, my recruiter, actually messaged me on Instagram and asked if I would possibly be interested in joining. And I was like, you know what the heck? Let's set up a meeting. If I join, I only want to be a combat medic. I don't want to talk about anything else. I want to be a combat medic. So we talked, and ultimately I decided to go ahead and sign for 6 years.
That's amazing. So let's talk about some of that combat medic training. Something listeners or viewers might not know is that I myself was a combat medic for over a decade in the same unit in which you're in now.
That's so awesome.
And, you know, training is a specific animal. I love the part where you said that I want to be a combat medic and nothing else. I had the same exact attitude coming in.
Really? That's awesome.
I was kind of torn between becoming a fighter pilot and or joining the Air Force or becoming a combat medic, and I fell in love with that romance of it and
that is a tough
World War
choice.
II movies and seeing all that action. So for you, what was training like, and what were some of the things that you found challenging and some of the things that you found most rewarding?
So basic training was an interesting experience for me. It was unlike anything that I had ever done before. Obviously, the point of basic training is to sort of break you down and then build you up again as a member of a team. I didn't have a particularly bad time with basic training, but it was definitely an interesting experience and not one that I would choose to repeat anytime soon. But it was extremely empowering because I felt like if I could make it through that environment and do pretty well in that environment and succeed at that I could probably succeed at a lot of other things in life as well. And then when I went to San Antonio for my medic training, I honestly immediately fell in love with it. The staff there, the cadre, even the drill sergeants were some of the most inspiring people I've ever met. They all had this incredible real-world experience, both combat medicine experience and then also experience in the civilian world and a wide variety of other things. And they just did such a wonderful job of teaching us and inspiring us and not only showing us how to do the medical skills, but what it means to be a medic and the dedication and the heart that takes. So I actually absolutely loved my time at Fort Sam.
That's awesome. And most recently, you went to Senegal, is that correct, in Africa, as part of the MedRex exercise?
Yes, I had the opportunity to go to Senegal last February, and it was an absolutely amazing experience. I was placed in an emergency department at a rural hospital and was able to work directly with local providers, local doctors and nurses, and provide direct patient care. And when we went, I don't think they knew exactly what a medic was, so the first couple days they were asking me to do things like interpret x-rays and things that I'd never done before, and I sort of had to explain, I'm not as good as you think I am. I'm not a medical student. I'm a nursing student and I'm a medic. But I was able to do things like sutures. And actually, some of the things that we saw and learned to do were pretty sad. I learned to perform respectful end-of-life rituals over deceased little children to honor their Muslim faith, and had to comfort people whose family members had just passed away, hold people's hands while they had, traumatic breaks set and things like that. But it was an incredible experience. And I actually don't speak French, and they speak mainly French and a language called Wolof there. So it was very humbling because I was trying to learn from these people and trying to work and understanding very little of what was actually being said. So it was definitely an exercise in just trying really hard to gain understanding. And I didn't see it as I was there helping them. I saw it as I was there learning from them and learning how to do things in their culture. And I was just so inspired by how excellent they were as providers and what incredible care they provided with such incredibly limited resources. If you go to a hospital there, you have to send your family member with a prescription to pick up everything you need from a local pharmacy, including, the needles, the iodine to cleanse your wounds, every medication that you're going to need. It's not in the hospital. Your family has to go get it. So it was definitely very different from working in a hospital here, but just an absolutely amazing experience.
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And thank you, for sharing that. That it's a lot of tough things that you see as a medic, in the medical field. And kind of expounding on that, not only do you work with people in this capacity as a combat medic for the Army National Guard in Vermont, but you also work with wildlife, I understand. So and you mentioned that you've been doing this for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about your wildlife journey, how you got into that, and what it is you do for, these wonderful creatures that you work with on a daily basis?
So, yes, I am a Vermont state licensed wildlife rehabilitator, which means that I'm licensed by the state of Vermont to take care of injured mammals and give them the care that they need until they can be returned back into the wild. I also have a federal permit to take care of migratory birds and do the same for them. I got started with this work pretty much as long ago as I can remember. I would always be the kid to find an injured baby mouse outside or an injured bird or pretty much any type of little creature and bring it home and be like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, can we take care of it? Can we keep it? And when I was about 6, I found a baby cardinal that had fallen out of a tree into one of our trash cans. It had fallen out of its nest. And I brought it back to my mom and was like, hey, look, I found a pet. That's going to be my pet. And she explained to me that actually it's a wild creature and that the kindest thing that we can do for it is to give it the care that it needs, but raise it in a way that it can be released back to freedom. And so she connected with a local wildlife rehabilitator named Ellen, and I had found my passion at that point. So over the next few years, I was able to work with Ellen, learn from Ellen, and she taught me how to raise a variety of creatures. And I started out with animals that you don't need a license for, like baby mice, baby rats, domestic animals, things like that. And then when I was 12, my mom got her own license to be a wildlife rehabilitator.
That's so awesome.
Yes,
what
it
a great
was amazing.
Story.
Yeah, and then we've been doing it ever since. We started Otter Creek Wildlife Rescue in Addison, which is a nonprofit now. And then I got my own license last year.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Thanks.
Well, good for you guys. That is just so incredibly touching. Again, to not just work with people, but to kind of let that proliferate into the surroundings, the wildlife around you. That is a huge thing.
So I've also had the ability to create a transport network using Green Mountain Animal Defenders. And how that works is if someone has found an animal somewhere in Vermont but is unable to transport it to a rehabber, they will contact me and I will actually make a post on this page saying that this creature needs a ride. And amazing volunteers from all corners of the state step up and actually transport these animals where they need to go for life-saving care. So it really does bring out the best in people. And I've had the chance to work with veterinarians, law enforcement, fellow rehabbers, kind finders, so many different people who are just doing wonderful work.
Wow. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So how long have you been in the Vermont Army National Guard at this point?
I have been in for just over 5 years. So I actually reached my 6 years at the end of this September.
That's awesome. And do you have any future kind of goals or expectations, looking at your career in the Guard?
So I'm still actually trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to do come September. So I have a lot of thinking to do. But regardless of what I decide, I could not be more grateful for every moment that I have spent in the Guard. Not only has it given me incredible training, I have met some of the best people in the entire world. I have so many amazing stories, and I'm actually graduating debt-free with my Bachelor's of Science in Nursing in 2 weeks. So that's all thanks to the Guard.
That is fantastic. And something for our viewers and listeners, if you don't know, the Vermont National Guard does have tuition assistance and college repayment as part of the program. So if you're looking to attend college, it's not a bad route to go if you're looking for some of that funding. So after graduating, looking ahead to emergency medicine, talk a little bit more about what is attracting you to working, in an emergency room and why you want to go that route.
So I have always been interested in emergency medicine. I like the chance to help people on what might be their worst day and to make their worst day slightly better. I like that you never know what's going to come in the door. Honestly, I like that it's fast-paced and interesting and that you never exactly know what you're going to see. Being a medic, unfortunately, I have not gotten the chance to deploy yet, but I was activated for a year and a half on the COVID-19 response mission. Yeah, so as a medic, I was actually activated for about a year and a half on the COVID-19 response. First, at the very beginning of COVID, members of my unit were tasked with setting up tents basically as an overflow hospital outside the emergency department of UVM Medical Center. And then I got off orders for a while, and then later I was involved in the vaccination mission and actually got to travel all over the state doing clinics, working with the Air Force and people from different Army units, which was a really awesome opportunity. I met some absolutely incredible Army and Air Force people, as well as Vermonters from all over the state. So that was a really, really awesome chance to come together and help the community during a pretty crazy and unprecedented time.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things I like to ask is, looking back at everything, looking back at your career in the military, looking back at all the things that you've done, what would you say to someone who's thinking about joining the Vermont National Guard, either Army or Air? And what are, maybe more specifically as a combat medic, some advice you might give them?
So I would say it's really important to think about things from all sides, make sure that this does work for you and for what you want in life. For me, it was absolutely the right move. Joining the Guard as a medic gave me incredible medical training. It was empowering for me at a time when I really needed that. I have made some of the most amazing connections with people of my entire life, and I got my college paid for. So it's really been a win-win. I would just say, look at how the Guard fits into your life. Don't be afraid to ask questions of your recruiter. Don't be afraid to ask people who are already in, who will give you their honest opinion. I had a couple of people when I was thinking about joining who were already medics and who were able to tell me honestly about, what to expect in basic, what to expect in AIT, which is the medic training for us, and then what to expect going forward as a medic. And that was hugely helpful. And then I've been able to talk with people since, now that I am a medic. I also think it's important to remember why we're doing what we're doing. And, sometimes not every drill is going to be fun and glamorous and an ad for the U.S. Army. You're not always jumping out of planes or doing anything very exciting. Sometimes you're doing inventory of medical supplies, but you're doing it for a reason. You're doing it so that if something does come up where you have to save someone's life, you're prepared. So be realistic about what's going to happen and think about what the Guard can give to you and what you can contribute to the Guard.
And one thing is, for the people listening and watching, I will say that becoming a medic in the Army does have a translatable skill. You do sit for your National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians, so that does apply to a civilian lifestyle if you decide that you want to work on an ambulance one day or as a paramedic one day. Sophia, I can't thank you enough for being with us today. What an incredibly unique and wonderful story you've shared with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure getting together with you guys today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, watching and or listening to Beyond the Battlefield, Stories of Mountain and Air. I'm Sergeant Dennis Nunez. Stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, keep ascending.